Hello everyone, Dom here, the narrator of this podcast. We started the Patreon page where you could give us your support to explore whether some aspects from live-action movies could work in the medium of animation. You want to bring in some big-name animators, filmmakers, and experts onto this podcast? You could help us by sponsoring the show. In return, you get early access to ad-free episodes, bonus episodes, bloopers, and research notes. You get to have your name on the credits and come hang out with us. We host monthly group screenings where we watch some movies and shorts. The Patreon page link is in the description. Enjoy the show.
Hello everyone! Welcome to the Reanimate This podcast, where we take one live-action movie and discuss how to turn it into an animation. This is Jay Wang once again, and Brandyn, and welcome back, Brandyn.
I feel like I never went anywhere, so little time has passed in my mind. And if you're a person who listens to this show, it only comes on once in a while, so every episode feels like a very special occasion, and I'm happy to be here for the first time since Christmas. I'm back at home in Atlanta now, going all the way to New York to do the recording last time was quite a feat. It's nice to be back in my own house.
Yes, and I'm not sure if you all heard of some noise in my background. I got like a red alert because there's going to be a blizzard in New York City right now. So, yes, anyone in New York, please be safe out there.
Stay inside.
Yeah, for sure.
Brandyn, so you introduced us this movie, Born in Flames.
This week of celebration, commemorating the 10th anniversary of the War of Liberation, is a time when all New Yorkers take pride in remembering the most peaceful revolution the world has known. It is time to look back on the events of a decade ago, to consider the progress of the past 10 years, and to look forward to the future.
Hi there. This is Isabel from Radio Ragazza, bringing you a little tune that you'll be hearing an awful lot of these days from the makers of our revolution. You might not be hearing it here, but you'll be hearing it everywhere else you go. Happy anniversary.
What is Born in Flames about? The movie is set during the 10th anniversary of a peaceful socialist democratic revolution in the alternative timeline of the United States of America. It follows two feminist groups in New York City, each voicing their concerns to the public by pirate radio. One group is led by Isabel, who is played by Adele Berthe, who operates Radio Ragazza. The other group is led by Honey, who is played by herself, who operates Phoenix Radio.
Good evening, this is Honey, coming directly to you from Phoenix Radio, a free radio station, a station not only for the liberation of women, but for the liberation of all, through the freedom of life which is found in music. We are all here because we have fought in the wars of liberation, and we all bear witness to what has happened since the war. We still see the depression from the oppression that still exists both day and night. For we are the children of the light, and we will continue to fight, not against the flesh and blood, but against the system that names itself falsely. For we have stood on the promises far too long now, that we can all be equal under the cover of a social democracy, where the rich get richer and the poor just wait on their dreams.
Through their news stories and reported information, we learned that the issues of sexism, misogynistic violence, and women's unemployment, racism, classism, and other societal problems haven't been resolved in this alternative timeline. Both Isabel and Honey were offered to join a women's army, whose leader is played by Hillary Hurst, and it is advised by a theorist, Zella Wiley, played by Florence Kennedy, but both radio hosts declined.
I don't want to be involved with the women's army. It's all talk and no action. It's all rhetoric. I've checked it out, and we're doing enough in the community by putting out our music.
But by us coming to you and requesting some time, obviously we're attempting change.
Then one day, a world-traveling political activist, Adelaide Norris, played by Gene Satterfield, is arrested by FBI agents at an airport and suspiciously dies while in police custody.
Police spokesmen report that Norris was picked up at International Airport late yesterday afternoon in response to a request by the FBI. She was to be arraigned late today on charges of conspiring to transport arms into the U.S. Norris is said to have hanged herself after writing a note in which she said she would rather die than spend another day in a fascist prison.
We see 3 editors for a socialist newspaper who are played by Becky Johnston, Pat Murphy, and Catherine Bigelow document their progression.
It wasn't murder. It wasn't premeditated. That's not party policy. You know the party doesn't operate like that. But if you say the party operates like that, think of who you're appealing to and think of what the consequences of that will be.
Well, it's one thing to suppress information, to diffuse attacks from the right, but this is out-and-out fabrication.
The party doesn't usually advocate this kind of tactic either.
The party never advocates this kind of tactic. And when you say the party does advocate this kind of tactic, what is it you're saying? What is it you're saying about the revolution? Are you saying that Adelaide Norris, who was probably a counter-revolutionary, knew more about the revolution than the party did? Listen, you can print anything you want. I can't stop you from printing it. But think about the consequences and think about what you're doing to the party and what the party stands for.
Yeah. Born in Flames is an interesting movie in the sense that in some ways, and I know that we talked about this the last time we talked, in some ways, if you were to watch this movie now, because, you know, there are so many Netflix revolutionary films, in some ways, the politics of Born in Flames might not surprise the average moviegoer anymore. But I would say that this is a very DIY movie, and that the political world of Born in Flames is a lot more fully realized than most movies. It is a post-revolutionary movie. And it shows how would we describe the world of Born in Flames? We would say maybe after a social democratic revolution, showing that there are still cracks in society. And what probably does stand out about Born in Flames, that you won't see in any movie now, or very few movies, is that it just feels real. The faces that you'll see in Born in Flames are just not the kinds of faces that you see in modern Hollywood movies. I would say that this was an intersectional film way before every film wanted to be kind of intersectional. It just feels like a lived-in world more than almost any movie. It's a world where you see it and you feel like it's a real place. It's kind of in a documentary style, and this movie is it just stands out because of its bold, innovative, real sense of place. Is that a good introduction to this movie? Do you guys feel like I kind of put it on a plate there?
Yeah, it was very fitting, surprisingly, in hindsight, because for the next 2 seasons, we are going to talk about the do-it-yourself filmmaking and how that parallel with indie animation of today. And there's so much thing we could learn about it from watching this movie. So, just here's another one question I want to ask before we move on to discussing its production, style, themes, and plot. How did you discover this movie?
Oh my God. I actually don't know how I found Born in Flame. Maybe I found it on the internet. I definitely remember seeing it for the first time in my 20s. I'd like to say that there was a specific person that introduced this movie to me or that I saw it at a certain age, but I might have just found it at random on the internet. Yeah, in fact that probably is what happened. Uh, yeah, I think I might have seen the trailer for it while hanging out on something awful or some forum, but I couldn't even say that for sure. I just think it's a movie that popped up into my consciousness.
Yeah, I think most of us have discovered certain like hidden gems through the deepest or the most niche part of the internet.
Yeah,
Don't you think,
this
Ryan?
this isn't a. Sometimes I have stories where a friend or a relative, or I saw it in a theater somewhere, or I got a really great recommendation. But yeah, I really do think this movie. I don't have that kind of story for this one. It just sort of popped up from the collective unconsciousness, and it feels like it's. I mean, if you've ever seen this film. It's a film that feels like it's always been out there somewhere.
Yes. So let's talk about this movie itself. It's a so what's I think one of the most distinct about what makes this movie distinct from the past movies that this podcast has covered is that this is docu-fiction rather than documentary. It's a narrative fiction but done in a style of documentary, or sort of like a collage of footages from various parts of New York City, specifically Manhattan. And so, based from what I researched, this is part of the no wave movement.
What is the no-wave cinema? No-wave cinema was an underground filmmaking movement that flourished on the Lower East Side of New York City from 1976 to 1987. It was a guerrilla film movement that emphasized a dark atmosphere of impoverished Manhattan at the time. It also contained transgressive elements with unrehearsed intimacy without any artistic concerns. The no-wave filmmakers watched the underground cinematic works of Andy Warhol, John Cassavetes, and John Waters, along with French New Wave and Italian neo-realist films at the city's art house movie theaters. The filmmakers are Scott B. and Beth B., Amos Poe, Jamie Neres, Abel Ferreira, Lizzie Borden, Catherine Bigelow, and Jim Jarmusch. It has some parallels to New York's punk rock music scene, where artists went for an avant-garde approach to rebel against the commerciality of mainstream rock music. In fact, this started with Ivan Krall of Patti Smith Group and Amos Poe shot punk rock performances at local clubs and they're offstage behind the scenes with an 8mm camera. They compiled footage together and released it as a documentary titled The Blank Generation in 1976. The use of consumer handheld cameras with an unpolished lo-fi look that became the movement's common characteristic. For the sake of authenticity, filmmakers cast non-professional actors with no training. Jamie Neres did this with her Super 8 feature film, Rome 78. The movie's amateur cast performed their improvisational roles over the top and broke their characters with occasional unintentional laughter. No-wave directors rejected the conventional storytelling by having a non-linear narrative. Lizzie Borden edited her narrative film Born in Flames with a collage-like approach, with fragmentary storylines interconnecting together. This decade-long DIY film movement in New York City has left an everlasting legacy. Indie filmmakers during the 1990s, like Richard Linklater and Kevin Smith, started their careers with making low-budget movies with no clear story structure about their everyday life. Robert Rodriguez did similarly, but made himself as a sole crew member with his action movie directorial debut, El Mariachi. Danish film directors Thomas Vinterberg and Lars von Trier started the Dogma 95 movement in 1995 by writing the set of rules to create stripped-down films with more focus on themes and characters. This has culminated in the early 2000s, where young middle-class American filmmakers such as Andrew Bujalski, Mark and Jay Duplass, Greta Gerwig, Joe Swanberg, and Lynn Shelton, etc., used their camcorders to make naturalistic, dialogue-driven movies depicting their mundane life. And this mumbling audio mix of their movies gave the new iteration of the DIY filmmaking movement the name Mumblecore.
Specifically, film directors living in the East Village of Manhattan. Back then, it was particularly among the poorest part of the city, as some people would told me. And okay, I'll get to some my personal stuff there, but people pretty much literally pick up the camera, go to any punk scene, and shot at anything there, and then stitched all footage together, and there you go. There's a movie. If Jean-Luc Godard has said, truth is okay. Movie is like a truth captured in 24 frames per second. So, what Lizzie Borden did, the director.
Who is Lizzie Borden? Linda Elizabeth Borden, or Lizzie Borden, is a daughter of a Detroit stockbroker. As a rebellious 11-year-old, she legally took the name of the alleged double murderer. She majored in fine arts at Wellesley College and got a job as an art critic in New York. After watching Jean-Luc Godard's films, she decided to become a film director and went for an adventurous streak. In 1976, she made an experimental documentary, Regrouping, which chronicled the fracturing of a woman artists collective. Throughout Lizzie Borden's independent filmmaking career, her works have investigated the intersectionality between race, class, gender, and power. Her first feature film, Born in Flames, was shot over 5 years with a budget of $30,000 and completed in 1983. It's a gritty docu-fiction with collage-like editing, featuring non-professional actors that explores social issues in a futuristic America. Her next film, Working Girls, depicted the lives of sex workers and maintained some characteristics of her debut, but it was more mainstream friendly. It received critical acclaim through its festival run and later won the Special Jury Prize in 1987 Sundance Film Festival. Borden made her first Hollywood feature, Love Crimes, but it has received too much studio interference from Miramax, the distributor of Working Girls. Love Crimes bombed at the box office, and Borden disowned the project despite its cult following. Still, Lizzie Borden tries to get her projects off the ground while working as a script doctor in Los Angeles. She directed some television episodes and pilots, and wrote an anthology of stories titled Whorephobia, which is about the lives of strippers. The book received praise for its humane depictions of sex workers. In 2021, Borden was invited to become a member of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences.
She shot this movie for over 5 years while living in Manhattan.
I totally believe it. I mean, it feels like, and it's a weird mismatch of, in some ways, this movie, there's in TV, there's something called the Seinfeld effect, where there's so many things that come after a piece of art that you're like, in a way, I've already seen this. And there are also parts of this movie that feel impossible to imitate. And one part of this movie that is impossible to imitate is the sense of place. Obviously, just that time and place in New York can definitely not really be replicated again. And you definitely feel like you're in New York. I'll put it like that.
Yeah, as a converted New Yorker, I agree. And my co-host of this evening is also a New Yorker. So Ryan, could you share your thoughts, since you haven't talked about much since we started recording?
Sorry. I mean, I feel like everyone kind of voiced what they, about the movie. I think where it comes to like Hollywood, sort of like, sharing these sort of these sort of politics like one after another. But I think particularly it was very well developed. It reminded me a lot of like almost like a more grounded version of like what if you took a post-apocalyptic version of like The Warriors is what reminded me of a lot of, like especially like the opening sequence with like the assault with like the gang on bicycles, like that kind of like really remind me a lot of that kind of like vibes.
I only watched the intro of The Warriors. You meant the Walter Hill movie, you know, that Can You Dig It?
Can you dig it? Can you dig it? Can you dig it?
Yeah.
Yeah, this was a pre-Giuliani New York City. God. It's like people back then thought that New York City was like the I don't know, so they all imagined that it was like hell on earth, and especially the borough of Brooklyn. People sort of associate Brooklyn with a crime and very dangerous to go out.
I mean, that's kind of. I mean, you think of like Williamsburg from like that era, or Flatbush, or any of like the sort of like really general areas now. Like back then, like no one wanted to venture there. Like there are a fair number of books that I read, like because I studied a little bit on like New York history from like the 70s and 80s, and like you look at like that area of New York, and it's just like the kind of like decay that happened, you know, whether through prostitution, drugs, gangs, everything that kind of happened. And not to mention, you're also peppering in like, you know, Son of Sam happening, like literally through like everything that could have gone wrong, you threw at New York City, you know, completely. And like that's part of the charm of think of like films that take place in New York of that era specifically in the 70s and the 80s, like Midnight Cowboy or The Warriors. Like you apply that to just Taxi Driver, they all kind of show that kind of era of New York in its like ugliness.
Yes, after Giuliani and his successors, I don't know, things got too gentrified. I feel like that's the more appropriate term. In fact, so here's my little bit of background. I actually lived in East Village for a while, and what resonated with this movie with me is that it was very countercultural. Like they showed you they showed you the different side of the world and the different possibility of the better world, or at least make you think that what would be the possible alternative. But at the same time, they also, especially, okay, no. What I'm trying to say is that they also challenge the, how should I put it, typical American liberal idealism, or like what I find it very surprising about this movie is that it really challenged the democratic socialist ideal, like kind of like even though it was shot during the Reagan era, like which is actually interesting considering.
Yeah, artistically, they did jump 2 revolutions ahead. They said the thing that you're even fighting Reagan on still ain't enough, and really dug into that, which I thought was really interesting.
And I would say that it's even more timely considering the hype around Zohran Mamdani, the first democratic socialist mayor of New York City. But again, to be honest, even though I'm somewhat sympathetic towards Zohran Mamdani, but at the same time, I'd rather be skeptical of his administration. But still, it's because I remember, considering living in East Village, I did encounter some people who are how should I put it? They are somewhat skeptical of the mainstream leftism of today, or at least the American leftism of today. Like they don't think that Bernie Sanders didn't go further enough. And surprisingly, this movie also thinks the same.
As the editors of the Socialist Youth Review, we would like to comment on the CBS break-in last week by the Women's Army. In a videotape by Zella Wiley, the Army exposed government duplicity not only in the cover-up of Adelaide Norris's death, but in the repression of active feminism with wages for housework. We extend our support to the Army as a legitimate revolutionary group because we also believe that the party has been undermining the economic and social position of women. Our government, which has prided itself on being the first democratic socialism, is neither democratic nor socialist. In forming an alliance with male labor, the government has reinforced the caste system that has always existed in this country. Women fought the war of liberation with the expectation that the government would work beyond reform toward a truly egalitarian society. Then and now, the party has argued that social transformation must wait until the country attains economic stability. But unless we struggle now for our rights, we will always be oppressed.
We are interrupting this program to bring you a special message from the Women's Army. And what's more, we will continue to make this kind of direct action until everyone understands and is prepared to do something about the way the government has betrayed women. Look at the reality of your lives. We live in a fake socialist state, one which exists in name only. The government thinks that socialism was instituted 10 years ago, after the War of Liberation. It denies the very basis of true socialism, which is constant struggle and change. Wasn't the War of Liberation fought to create an egalitarian state? Why then does the government attack women, putting them out of their jobs and relegating them to secondary positions in the home? The media, the tool of the government, reinforces their position by promoting images of women as wives and mothers. We are surrounded by the very images our mothers fought to destroy. Decades of women's work for socialism, for freedom of choice, equality of opportunity, is being swept away. Once again, we are placed outside politics. It isn't only women who will suffer. You know the way this pattern continues. Blacks, Latins, all ethnic and social groups will suffer as the old sex, race, and class divisions re-emerge. There can be no true socialism until we are all represented in government. We demand a quota system which is truly expressive of our numbers, and we will not stop fighting until we get proportional representation in government.
It was very much ahead of its time. Sure, democratic socialism may be a better alternative to Reaganism. However, they still preserve the institution that kept people down and still enforce hierarchical structure. And they also showed you that the FBI still exists. The same institution that kept. Okay, I don't know too much about the history of FBI, but we all know that they goes after communists and political dissidents, and I think it started out as sort of like a. All right, never mind about what it started out as, but I'm trying to bring up that Scorsese movie, The Killer of the Flower Moon, and how that sort of ties with the beginning of the FBI, but you know what I mean.
I mean, I would had I seen that movie. I think I'm gonna do Killers of the Flower Moon in one battle after another, back to back, and just get a marathon of what that guy's been up to for the last 3 or 4 years.
Ryan, do you have any things to say?
Regarding the tangent we're on, I mean, because I have seen Killers of the Flower Moon, but I think the problem is there are issues there that I think are present in both that movie as well as also Born in Flames, because both those tie with inequality to some degree, with Killers of the Moon, especially between the sort of racism that was there. But I mean, the thing between poems, I think, and a lot of these modern movies is that I found striking, particularly with Foreign Flames, was I think, despite the sort of post-revolution era that took place, and it felt a little too. It felt not too far from where we're at. We're like sort of like a middle ground from like the Reaganomics switching over to like, you know, having a socialist mayor now to like we could end up being like that movie essentially is what I sort of my vantage point was when I watched it. I guess going off the tangent, because talking to on Moon and like the sort of FBI sort of like taking down communists from like the 50s and 60s to back then when it was going after sort of like certain discrepancies that existed, whether it was because for me, I think when I think of the FBI and like that earliest infancy between because I think of also Public Enemies with Johnny Depp and Christian Bale, because that also shows the FBI, however, in a different kind of attitude and mindset because they're going after essentially uh, gangsters that were thought of as almost like think of it almost in the way of how we think of Luigi Mangione in the sense of like, oh, these are sort of radical people, but they're like new wave heroes in a way. But I think, yeah, I'm kind of like losing my traction here on the tangent, but yeah, I feel like this movie kind of is like another sort of like add-on of like sort of yeah, I kind of lost my traction. Someone pick up the slack here.
So yeah, I mean, like it.
You were talking about Public Enemies with Johnny Depp and Christian Bale, and you were talking about the portrayal of authority in these films, and that the changing relationship to authority in each of them.
Yeah, I mean that also has into like, particularly there was the scene with one of those when I guess our main revolutionary getting sort of sidelined by the authorities, and sort of almost made to become a martyr, basically. Which I mean that still is very much I think present. We see today, both in Born in Flames, both in Public Enemies, and today we think of like Alex Preddy, Renee Good, within these people who kind of just got caught in the crossfire and in a way became martyrs of the revolution in a sense.
Yeah,
I guess was kind of the point I was
and
trying to make.
yes, and we're gonna spoil a lot of things there. So this movie also depicts an activist who became a martyr of their cause. She was, trying to help the Polisario Front, which is a resistance against the Moroccan occupation of Western Sahara.
Oh, she's asking if you are Zaliwali's friend.
Yes, I am. And could you ask her, does she understand why I'm here to see her?
Elle dit qu'elle est l'amie à Zaliwali et elle voudrait savoir si tu sais pourquoi elle est là.
Oui, nous comprenons pourquoi elle est là. On va vous aider, et vous aussi vous allez nous aider.
She knows why you are here, and we're gonna help you, but also we want that you help us.
To tell thank you for her help, and I'd like to know how I can help her, because right now I don't understand how I can help her.
Elle dit qu'elle te remercie davantage pour l'aide que nous lui avons offerte, mais en ce moment, elle ne sait pas comment elle va nous aider.
Nous voudrons qu'elle vienne chez nous, vivre et travailler avec notre parti. Comme ça, elle serait mieux au courant.
If you want to help us, you could come all the way to the Sahara and work with the guerrilla, and then you will have much more opportunities to understand our struggle there, and then maybe when you come back, you can have better to show to your people what our struggle is.
Vous allez lui faire voir la carte et faire l'explication.
You have an African map here, and I would like to show you some of the geographical location of the Western Sahara. You have Morocco here in the north.
However, and among other things, she's also openly queer person, and she's very outspoken, and the FBI have been surveilling her and.
Adelaide Norris, 24. She seems to be the founder of the Women's Army. Her background? Ordinary. Typical of a lot of blacks. Mother domestic. That's her on the left. Her father died when she was a teenager. 8 kids in the family. Adelaide's the oldest. She helped raise the others. These are some of them. Always a jock, good in track and basketball. Goes to school nights, works construction jobs during the day. Homosexual? Yes. Women's Army appears to be dominated by blacks and lesbians. Norris started as a radical separatist vigilante group 3 or 4 years ago.
Decided to caught her at, arrest her at the airport, and then the entire the second half is mostly focused on whether if she was committed suicide or if there was some sort of cover-up going on. So I don't know. Okay, even though it may not be a very completely similar thing for obvious reasons, it sometimes reminds me of the whole Jeffrey Epstein, suicide debate. Like, did he kill himself or someone killed Jeffrey Epstein? If you're aware about this conspiracy theory.
Oh, we're all very aware of it. But it's I think in the vantage point of, especially, I think, martyrdom and conspiracies of any sort, I think, particularly with this movie, I think it does such a great job of sort of like shifting the vantage points across, like, multiple people caught in like this kind of in this world. You kind of catch from like those that are working in office, and sort of the journalistic side of things between people that are revolutionaries, like down.
And one of the editors is played by Catherine Bigelow, like long before she directed Near Dark. Like, this was around the time she started her directing career.
Yeah, I was thumbing through the credits. I was like, because I was sort of boggled to like see of any like anyone in mind. I think that was like the one that like caught me the most like off guard was seeing her name pop up.
So anyway, okay, I finally remember what the actress, the activist in the movie's name there. So Adelaide Norris, that's the character's name. So the second half pretty much focused on what exactly led to her death, and then there's like a one plot line where Women's Army trying to expose the public about it turns out the government behind her death. Brandyn, what are you trying to say?
Yeah, we don't just have post-revolutionary infighting. We have post-revolutionary infighting. You have the different groups of different political intensity that are fighting over this woman's fate, and it's interesting because really does a good job of portraying that, of course, the majority of people that are in this situation aren't radicalized. They don't know everything about politics. They're just trying to survive and have their own dignity from day to day.
And all right, so I mentioned up the Polisario front because the reason why I brought this up right now, because when I watched this movie for the first time, I was sort of I was sort of remembering like how this whole Western Sahara conflict was better underreported, and I remember reading a story about Greta Thunberg went there to meet with the people fighting against the Moroccan occupation. Boom! There's a whole story, whole subplot about Polisario front, and then they brought in like a Swahili. Sorry, I mispronounced it, but they brought one of the resistance member to Adeline Norris, and she was talking in French, and and they're asking her for help, and there's like a sequence of guerrilla female fighters, training. So yes, that's why I brought this up. So why we're so going back and forth. I mean, because what's interesting about this movie is that there's barely any like character arc, and that's fine. I mean, for a movie that is this, non-conformist and very anti-conventional, there's really no like five act structure, no like exact clear villain and there is conflict and there is villain, but then it's very abstract, if you know what I mean.
Oh, for sure. It very much feels like a very much like DIY style, like kind of like almost like documentary in that kind of sense. Even though it is, in a sort of fictionalized dystopian. I use fictionalized very loosely because I feel like, again, many of the things that are in this movie feel not too far from like where we're at currently in the current uh socioeconomic time frame right now. But it is very done very in a very unique sort of way.
It's true that there definitely isn't a traditional main character arc, but however, there are groups that are competing in this story. So I think that through the groups, you as the viewer are meant to observe these groups, see how they're responding to Adelaide's murder. You're asked to reflect on it yourself. I wouldn't say that there's definitely not a strong character arc per se, just because of the way that it's structured. But there's definitely like there definitely are character arcs. I mean, there are story arcs. There's definitely changes in the characters and the atmosphere and stuff like that. Even if it's not like a traditional, like you said, like a traditional person needs to learn a skill in order to achieve the goals of the story. It's not like a traditional Hollywood structure for sure.
Yes, it's all over the place. It's very chaotic, and that's fine because for a movie that is very establishment, you have to pick chaos. Brandyn, so you mentioned about how this movie would hold up compared to like the rebellious, I don't know, like a countercultural movies of today, especially like stuff available on Netflix. I don't know if you ever watch like a countercultural piece on like any like streaming services, but however, I was very reminded a lot of like very anti-establishment movies that came out the same period or before or similar around the time of Born in Flames, or the movies that came out just very recently. So, Brandyn, could you share more thoughts about that?
Yeah, I could totally talk about how this film kind of compares to anti-establishment films of today. Let's see. It's definitely slickly edited or has a strong point of view in the sense of we talked about how it doesn't have a central thorough line that it's trying to expose. When you think about, and maybe these aren't the kind of DIY anti-establishment movies that will come right to mind, but I think The Big Short or Spotlight or Parasite. And of course, these are quote unquote anti-establishment movies. but they have a lot more point of view. They're going to tell you what they want to tell you, then tell it to you, and then tell you what they just told you, if that makes sense. This is really a film that doesn't simply like show you the ideas of resistance, but instead enact the ideas of resistance more than more that they enact the ideas of resistance more than teach you about the ideas of resistance.
Hi, this is Jay. Sorry about the audio problem here. Because of the snowstorm is happening while we are recording, and the internet connection is kind of a bit funky right now.
And because of the fact that you have a film critique of capitalism and inequality, but it does it through the lens of a family of people that you can root for individually. I don't know if there are characters in Born in Flames that you would say, "Oh, yeah, I love this character and want to hang out with them." You know?
Yes. Right. So I don't know. I'm watching this. All right. I said this before, and during the screening. So this is all right. So we're gonna share a lot of hot takes, considering this. We are talking about a very anti-establishment, anti-conformist movie. So yeah. If you have a hot take, share all you want, as long as it's not bigoted. If you said something very mean-spirited or very racist or sexist, anything like that, you're out. So here's my personal hot take. So this is more rebellious than, say, One Battle After Another, and I actually prefer this over One Battle After Another. So okay, looks like
Yeah, this is a film that I haven't seen, so I can't give a strong. I've got to do that and the other movie, Killers of the Flower Moon. I might just have to have a long film marathon or something.
yeah. Ryan, what are you trying to say?
Oh no, I was trying to think of my hot take, to be honest. Uh, for me, I think this film is very like I do like this approach to like sort of creating a sort of dystopian New York in this kind of way. Although I feel like because it went sort of like in a very like abstract sort of like grungy kind of way, I feel there'd been a much more like clearer way to say it. I feel like there's films that might have been able to like do a much like more direct approach. Like I think of like films of like critiques on like society that were more like more film. I mean, the media film I think too immediately with like the blowing up of the tower. Immediately, my brain went to a film from like I think it's from the 70s. I want to say Network, which criticizes media and media literacy, and it ends with I guess spoiler alert. Ends with the central anchor that basically gets sort of almost turned to a prophet, a televised prophet essentially, gets him assassinated by revolutionaries.
And starring the mad prophet of the airways, Howard Beale.
Network news anchorman on the UBS Network News Show, known to millions as the Mad Prophet of the Airwaves, was shot to death tonight in a fusillade of automatic rifle fire just as he began this evening's broadcast.
In a lot of ways, that for me, the blowing of the tower kind of echoed that a little bit. So in my mind, I prefer kind of Network in that comic. But then again, Network had a very much a clear cut like arc for characters, not only for the central news anchor, but so the executives as well. And I feel it's a little more like direct, but not like crossing the line. I don't know if this movie did either, but um, I feel it was a little more like straightforward to me.
I feel like this very messy approach is in a way Lizzie Borden rebelling against the very traditional way of telling stories. It's very much rooted in the past new wave filmmaking, French new wave, Yugoslav black wave, Czechoslovakian new wave, which is where the new generation filmmakers decide to rebel against what they have taught when it comes to traditional filmmaking, and they ended up making a very very anti-authoritarian and like I said, anti-establishment movies that is also aesthetically very anti-order and unconventional. That's where the Born in Flames sort of again. And in fact, while watched, so there's like one movie I wanted to recommend to you, Brandyn. It's a Japanese movie called Happy End, and it's directed by Neo Thora, who is a son of Japanese composer Ryuichi Sakamoto. It's about high school, and character is a Japanese person of Korean descent, and it's set in this futuristic Japan. And one day, there was an incident happened where the school's principal's car has been flipped over, and that causes some degree of panic. So the school installed this mass surveillance, and it goes into this issue of resisting against techno-fascism and how that ties with the Japan's colonial history, especially colonialism in Korea.
あんな最低なやつが緊急事態でっち上げて独裁者になりかけてんだろ。
やばいね。こうやってみんな遊んでいく間に気づかず死んでいくんだよ。ルールだからと黙って従うのかよ。おい！お前黙ってなさい。あとちょっとしか一緒にいられないしさ。
本当の地震が来たらろくなことが。
Yeah,
it's very, very rebellious movie. Even the aesthetic is very rebellious, but not in the Born in Flame kind of way. It's very much. How should I put it? It deliberately breaks 180-degree rule, and it has this very unusual composition. And it's rebellious in a very thought way.
I assume that this film is going to be in the show notes for our listeners to check out after this, right?
Oh, sure. Go watch Happy End. It is amazing.
What's it called?
I would say this is Happy End. HAPPEND. Happy End.
All right, cool.
So yeah, I will consider this movie as the 21st century Theory for Conduct, which is a movie by Young Vigo, which also about students rebelling against school authorities. So yes, I would argue that it is very rebellious, that it makes one battle after another feel performative. And to all fairness, one battle after another has some a message where there's a one message that Born in Flame doesn't have, if you really want to really resist against authority, you need your community first and get well connected. There's a message there, but other than that, it's mostly just simply about one guy, searching for her, his kidnapped daughter. And it's adapted from like Thomas Pynchon's, I would say like kind of mainstream, but still very unconventional novel, or novella. But you get my point. So to moving on to discussing how we could turn that into an animation. And while watching this, I've sort of imagined it to be very experimental animation that doesn't go with the convention. So, Brandyn, you mentioned that you would imagine the hypothetical animation take on Born in Flames, or an anime media that shares a similar spirit with Born in Flames, to be looking something like more collage and scene-like. It looks like an art from like an indie scene.
Yeah, I think you've really got to embrace impossibility with this one. And rotoscoping, we always talk about, every time I come here, I always say this should be rotoscoped. So I thought it would be just a fun format, only because it's subjective, much like, this film is about subjective experiences. It's about the competing subjective experiences of groups of people, which makes me think about zines. I've been looking at a lot of zines and getting a lot of itchy paper into my hands over the last couple of weeks. So thinking about different sequences in this film with different styles of drawing made me use my imagination a little bit.
So, Ryan, an indie animator, what do you think today's animation equivalent to Born in Flame would look like, and how that would tie with the current political climate and the grassroots social movements of today?
For that, I think it would need to be something more akin to, like most like modern animation, like of today, like is very like linear and narrative driven. There isn't as much like I feel like experimentation in the realm. I feel like you see that more so like across a very few select like indie animators. Like I think of like people like Jack Stauber or Pleasant Trees, or very few on Adult Swim, respectfully. But I think for this film specifically, to turn to animation, like my brain went to like there's a collage film called Frank Film that I feel like would work in this sort of vein. I mean, even before we saw the film, we saw a couple experimental films, and like I feel like those styles echo it. But my brain leeches onto, because of how the sort of guerrilla style filmmaking that was done with this. I think of like almost akin to like anthropomorphizing the characters, and even like doing like something akin to like Fritz the Cat. Like you hear the audio in Fritz the Cat from like the 70s, like that's all done like out and about. Like, it's not normally done in a studio. That's like done in like almost like live recordings of people like record like outside. Like it has that ambience to it. Like something akin to that, I feel like this film would echo. I mean, do I think necessarily? I think that would fly in today's sort of world of animation. And I feel like need more of like the underground scene for sure. I think this film speaks to that. Exponential. I feel like the kind of scrappiness of it speaks to that. In like the indie scene of animation today, I think to do it, you have to do it in that kind of old school kind of mindset. But I think today's sort of market, likes the charmable. Like I literally like 2 days ago, the teaser dropped for the short film The Mountain for the new album, and that is apparently done in cell animation. And I think today's market's starting to, at least for animation, I think, is starting to sort of recognize and appreciate the older stuff a little bit more. Go back to 2D, go back to cell animation. As much as that's sort of like feel, as much as that makes me feel like an old man, with a cane screaming out, like doing it in that kind of backsheet kind of style is the way to go for this film.
Yeah, definitely. Like, even though it's not a very clear audio, but yeah, there's definitely like this, I don't know, very real. It's more like it never feel stay artificial. Like when I did a group screening of this movie, watched, and I even I screened like 4 short films that documentary element, and I mean documentary elements, like they used home movies and guerrilla style filmmaking into the storytelling, and also a bit of a collage. And what's been really interesting about is that that animation is an inherently immersive medium. Like it's always immersive by default, but I always thought of, is it possible to be anti-immersive or non-immersive, like the theaters of Bertolt Brecht, or some of the more avant-garde live-action movies. I mentioned Jean-Luc Godard, and I personally talked about Lars von Trier with his Dogville, like his minimalist movies. Like they discourage you to identify with the characters. I mean, what do you think?
I mean, a fair amount of those films, I think.
Dogville. Yeah, I saw a little bit of Dogville. What a weird movie. Actually, Lars von Trier's entire discography could be described as, quote, what a weird movie. But also a little bit like Born in Flames in that it really has it has such a raw visual style that seems kind of attainable to a person, but also so specific of its time and place that it feels like you couldn't remake it. I'll put it like that.
Oh, definitely. But there's like a part of it you really want to. It really sort of encouraged you to pick up a camera and make movies with your friends. It just feels like that. Like he was part of the Dogman '95 movie, which the whole point, the whole goal is to pick up a camcorder and make movies with anything with you have as a prop. So, and Ryan, what are you trying to say? Like I thought the like non-immersive animated movies.
I mean, in terms of like non-commercial animated movies, like you mean like today's like market?
I meant animated animation that doesn't immerse you or discourage to immerse in the sense that it just fight with the character. Instead, you're just gonna critically analyze the theme, much like like I mentioned Bertolt Brecht's play.
I see. Like films that kind of can break that level of immersion, where you kind of have to like analyze it in general. I feel like I see that because there are a fair amount of I feel like animated like documentaries that do that, where it kind of forces you to sort of like look at like the greater picture of what he's trying to bring to your attention. Like immediately in my mind, there's two I think of immediately. There's a short that came out actually that was on the Oscar shortlist that I managed to catch at a screening called "I Died in Irpin," which is about the Russian invasion of Ukraine, the recent one. And it's essentially from the vantage point of the animator.
Живе під охороною Всевишнього, ти під покровом Бога Небесного оселиться. Він спасе тебе від сіті ловця і від пошесті згубної. Не побоїшся страху вночі, ані стріли, що летить удень.
And you are essentially going with her through the ride, but it breaks it up using actual footage from it. I think when a film blends mediums like that, I feel like especially in the realm of like, I see that more in experimental animation, or when times when animation breaks that fourth wall, where it kind of makes you look at like, oh, what's bring your attention. It can do that. I think it applies especially when we're talking Born in Flames because it's done as sort of like a documentary kind of style of like showing you the different vantage points around. I Died Airplane does that in a way, but only from one perspective, but you're kind of seeing it from like the reality, almost like on a very like shaky look of it. Or I think immediately to a film I saw from, I think it's 2008 it came out, but the film called Waltz Bashir, which is about the Lebanon War.
After the 1982 invasion of Lebanon, I lost my memory. Now, in order to remember, I'm looking for those who can never forget.
And the ending of that movie is really just actual footage of like death and destruction and the reality of it. It takes you immediately out of it. It forces you to look at it. It forces you to see the reality of the conflict. And mind you, the whole entire film is done almost like a comic book, like graphic novel kind of style, which fits with the themes of war and fits with the themes of almost it being anecdotes, which it is a collection of different anecdotes throughout. You can apply it also from that vantage point, not commercially, when you look at films that are about visually taking you from the animation to the reality or from the creation side of it. There's been a lot of films that do that breaking of, at least from the films that I've seen at least have done it at least to some extent successfully, where it can do that, to where it can kind of break that immersion, but makes you think about, almost art versus creator kind of mindset. But it's a matter of the filmmaker in charge of doing that, the animator doing that in charge of it. What do they want you, the audience, to take away from it? Where do they want that snap to come in, where you kind of are, snap to the reality or snap to the themes that it wants to think of, where you're thinking of the technique, the detail, the sort of mediums at play. These are also assets to, I think, consider with that. But yeah, that's kind of my my sort of input there with that.
So this is where we just kind of discuss more tangible things. So Born and Flame is a very rebellious movie. Could we make a rebellious animated media about radical politics and everyday people who are involved in this politics or have some thought about that, political views? I mean, I do have some ideas.
There's an easy answer.
It seems easier to get. It seems a lot easier to get a film crew to get together to make a film than a group of animators. Animation takes so much. It's maybe a little bit more of a top-down style. It's hard for me to imagine a group of animators coming together on a project and sticking with it, especially if they want to make a political theme. Suddenly you'll have 3 different groups of animators fighting over the final cut.
Right. I mean, that's a difference right there. Like, from what I heard, that difference between shooting a movie with a camcorder and trying to make an animated movie about, going outside and something like that is that in live action movies you just go to that location with a camera with your own small crews and cast, but however in animation you have to build the entire background from ground up. I mean, that's what I think the background artist from a few years ago on Twitter have made that comparison, like a very distinct comparison.
I mean, that is
yes,
true.
I mean, sure, there is a but I also but I just thought of something. Just I would just say that perhaps I think Ralph Bakshi did a similar thing. Just I would say, like, let's say if you want to if you want your animated scene at least hand-drawn animated scene to set in this specific kind of street outside, then, well, go out, take a picture of that, street, come back, and composite it with your animated character. There you go. Or at least Photoshop that photo, with filters to make it look like it is done in 2D. If you know what I mean, it looks like it was hand-drawn.
I know that there are tons and tons of collaborative animation projects where lots of animators work together on a central theme. I don't like to look at Google while I'm talking, but I can just bet you that it's very likely.
I'm aware about this project where there was like an open call of animators, and just recently television just started the new open call. So there's that, and I'm also part of it. I'm making a sequel to a segment that I did. So I was also thought of something, again, another hot take. So a while before I talked about how if you really want to make an anti-authoritarian, anti-establishment media, then you have to abandon convention and do it the most tell it the most embrace the chaos, because in my opinion, conventional storytelling is critical to anti-authoritarian methods, and conventions are very much conformist in nature and only appeals to the status quo. And that's why I feel like One Battle After Another feels very performative in spite of it. And here is my another animation hot take. While I do believe that 12 rules of animation, you probably learned that when you take a animation class, like 12 rules of animation, squish and squatch, and appealing character design. Sorry, okay, I'm just gonna pull up the 12 rules of animation right now. So, and I meant that 12 basic principles of anime by Ollie Johnston and Frank Thomas. So, squish and squatch, anticipation, staging, arc, timing, exaggeration. I mean, they're useful, but however, in my opinion, encourage you to make conventional animation. However, to all fairness, and this was something my animation professor had told me, if you really wanted to do rules, you have to master those 12 basic principles first. And she even said that during the lecture, you gotta know the rule before you break them. So Ryan, do you? Okay, so I'm not sure what's your response to this, but however, I also wanted to hear your animation hot take. Oh shit, Ryan's caught off.
Yeah, I think that's something happened there.
Okay.
So listen, what an interesting situation. I don't have a blazing hot take. I've given, honestly, we talked over the holiday how I consider animation to be kind of a solved medium. All of the really amazing things in animation, I don't want to say have been done in the sense that there aren't any new frontiers to conquer, but just that we've seen it. We've seen what the art form can do in so many ways. Unless you're adding new forms of computerization or CG or digital, or you can always add some element of more. But I feel like the animation that I saw is kind of the same as the animation that I see today. And that there may be a more I don't know, advanced or sharper or crisper animation style, but it doesn't seem to blow away anything that I saw as a kid. And in fact, I find myself really fascinated with things that I saw years ago, just because studios were attempting to innovate in it more, or because there were more animators, or because there was like more commercial interest in it at the time. I saw a press release that was talking about how a bunch of the really old Hanna-Barbera animation from the 70s is going to be on Tubi. And as I was looking at the highlights of all the animations, I said to myself, wow, all of that stuff looks beautiful even for today.
Yeah, I agree. And actually, UPA, United Production America, I think, or okay, sorry. Oh shit. Ryan, you're back.
Yeah, sorry, I got disconnected because the snowstorm is just bad.
Okay. So yeah, we talked about the whole, Brandon's thing that animation itself is already an absolved medium. Like there's no frontier to go to. But and before that, I shared my hot take about how 12 basic principles of animation only encourage you to make conventional, like approach, and it's very antithetical to like if you want to tell a story with anti-authoritarian theme or like say like or like any like anti-establishment politics, then it's better to break the 12 basic principle of animation. And look, and to all fairness, even my animation professor told me you gotta master the basic principles first before you break them. So that's one of my hot takes. You got any hot takes?
I think you could. I think there's a yes and no answer to this. Because, I mean, earlier we were talking about, like, anti-authoritarian or revolutionary-based films, especially in animation. Like, the immediate one I thought to, like, immediately of, like, each a group of animators in a room, was Bow Down of Sadness, which, like, while it's mostly very, like, stilted, there are points where it is very, like, fluid and does obey by the 12 pencils animation. Like, the little end of the movie is literally, like, going towards the French Revolution. Like, the whole thing is very, like, much about, like, the feminist movement and about revolution at its core. And yet it does, in some capacity, go with it, but also sometimes also goes against it. It plays the, but yet it is also, again, a very anti-authoritarian animated film. And it's literally one of, like, I think, probably one of the cornerstones of, like a more experimental, technically anime, but still animation.
Yes, and that's what I like about that movie, Belladonna of Sadness. And also actually I don't know, like I do you have your personal hot take on animation? That is very anti-conformist.
I mean, I feel like it's kind of always been, I think of, like, even, like, in, like, the early infancy of, like, when you're getting, like, the Fleischer shorts, you're getting, like, literally, I think of, like, even, like, the early, like, animators of Looney Tunes are crying out, like, Tex Avery, Chuck Jones, Bob Clampett. Like, there's this whole place they worked in way back when called Termite Terrace, which was just a rundown shack on, like, Warner Brothers lot that, like, they were just dick around and do pranks on each other. Like, some of the guys that you see in the shorts that, like, laying a match on their feet and stuff, they just did to each other for, like, just for, like, fun, just for shits and giggles, and it, completely, like, unhinged, like, just couple punks just, like, having fun. But, like, you look at, like, animation like that, and it's just like, yeah, it's like going against, like, the norms. They're taking the piss out of, like, Hollywood in their own kind of way. Like, even if you go to, like, I would dare and say, like, some of the UPA stuff too. But like animation is a very non-conformist kind of, I think, medium, and there's a certain charm to that. It's part of the reason why I fell in love with the art form itself.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, in my opinion, I would say, the most successful anti-authoritarian and conformist or non-conformist animated movie I've seen this decade is Wolfwalkers, and I really like how they use distorting perspectives, or at least pretty much throw the idea of perspective out of the window. And I feel like it really fits well with its anti-colonial theme, considering and I talked with Scout Tafoya in depth about this movie, just how should I put it? It has a very non-conformist politics, and how that art style reflects that. And and then I remember saying, like, this is what people should be making. Like, instead of just being nostalgic about Disney, just this is what people should be making. I mean, considering what's going on in world right now, like democratic backsliding and more like autocrats are gaining power. Like, it's time to that we need to make more art that doesn't conform. And this is also, I feel like, Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio. I feel like it really failed, like, because it was very conventional. Like, it was made for, like, people are really nostalgic about Disney stuff, and considering how fascism exploit nostalgia, it deliver the anti-authoritarian message and anti-fascist message very clearly. I mean, I've seen stop motion animated movies that play around with it does a very unusual thing as a way of telling a story about resisting against authoritarianism. I mean, that's another my hot take, and there's more. Like, and this is also my personal problem with Nights of Guinevere, which is his new show at Glitch. But however, after learning about her perspective as a former Disney animator, I kind of see why she made it like this. But it feels, how should I put it? It feels conformist, or at least it's not anti-conformist enough, because they ask you people to hold on to that the deal for the better order of the past. Like, we need to maintain that status quo that has been already dead.
Yeah, this is a common trope in fantasy fiction, of course.
The problem is, I think, like, especially with, like, animation, especially in like the Western market, is that you're appealing mostly to children. Unfortunately, like, there's a fair market of like it appealing to the greater mass, but especially children. Um, Even though we have like more mature animation now, I think whenever you're any of the glitch productions which do appeal to like a sense, you even get films like uh films that can speak to, I think, multi-generational audiences, like Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio, like now Arco, or even Amelie and the Character Rain, which can speak to multiple demographics. The problem is, it's just what's going to speak larger to the studios. What's going to make more bank? What are they going to willing to invest in more? I mean, it depends on how the times change. I think with distributors like Neon willing to like pick up more of these sorts of films that are willing to sort of like have a more like not Pixar, not Disney, not fluffy kind of voice, it might shift. Because like I feel like beyond like European markets like Cartoon Saloon, who did Wolfwalkers, or Studio that did Arco, I think it's mostly I've seen mostly like from anime studios, like occasionally like, a few years, mostly anime studios doing more of the mature take that are more direct, that are willing to talk more about political themes, that are willing to sort of like take that step. Like I literally, I've read a fair bit of, I feel like not exactly an animation, but the recent chapters of Chainsaw Man, which are very like anti-American. Like they're very like anti-American with one of the characters in almost a satirical, nihilistic kind of way singing the Star Spangled Banner. Which is very like it's hard because you have to, I think, multitask with animation to sort of get that audience, even if you have a very like deep philosophical message to sort of like speak out. It's just like how many are going to listen to it, how many are going to watch it. That's the unfortunate underlying thing with it, no matter how poignant it is.
I mean, even if it's like, even if Guillermo del Toro said it's not a genre, it's a medium or it's a cinema or something like that. It's like it's made for everyone. However, I feel like, in my opinion, his Pinocchio movie really failed to live up to that. All because it has to be appeal to everyone. And I mean, I was like, well, how the heck Pan's Labyrinth kind of bypass all this? I mean, besides being a live action movie, like you could do some sort of like you could do something like that in animation, but his Pinocchio movie didn't go there.
I bet Pan's Labyrinth had a third of the budget of Pinocchio. And that would be your answer right there.
I mean, so sure. I mean, okay. By the way, we still got some time. I mean, we could still ponder about like how do we make the most rebellious animated media? And like okay, to be fair, Ryan, you brought up like the early Warner Brothers cartoon and the UP. Hey, they're very inherently rebellious. And yeah, I agree with that. I think it's very much possible, and it's very much there's this kind of this non-conformist spirit that you see in like French New Wave movies, and even No Wave movies, where just your everyday people start picking up cameras and make whatever they make, and that it speaks to their more, how should I put it, something that is genuinely from the people of the lower class. It's literally fighting against the bourgeois culture.
I think one thing just might be the training. You think of animation, you typically think of something that takes some level of education and access to get good at from a production standpoint. Maybe one or two people that can do digital animation. I feel mentioning like Flash, but like even like the digital animation tools, everybody doesn't know how to use them. Video editing. These are just a lot of tools that are tools of group training. And of course, I was at the Atlanta Free Fair just yesterday, and I was talking to some of the organizers who helped to put on that event, and they were talking about how 2 years is about the average time for somebody who is in like activist organizing circles before they are quote unquote burned out, and then they get a job or they change cities or they have a change of life, and then they're kind of like on to something else. Like that 2-year period is like the standard. When you think about animation projects, they usually take a little time, and to even become good at that specific medium, because animation just has, I think, a little bit of a longer learning curve than even making traditional short film. You've got to go through the learning curve of learning how to animate. Then you have to go through the second curve of like, all right, who we're collaborating with and what's our shared ideological vision. There's a little bit of a more narrow hoop to go through, but I do think that you'll find more of this kind of stuff in maybe collaborative projects, or what's the word I want to use here? Anthology projects. Things that call for the diverse skills of a group of people working on the same theme. Does that make sense?
Yes. And I would say that yes, it takes a long time to master, drawing, figures or shapes. But however, I think I would still encourage people to make art no matter what, and say probably start with making the most abstract thing you can do. And in my opinion, abstract animation is a lot more democratic in the sense that anyone can do it. Anyone with no art experience or no art skill do it. I just try and make, like, imagine Jackson Pollock painting, but it's moving. It's literally moving. It's like it's alive.
Yeah.
I mean, Ryan. I've seen your work, and it sometimes reminds me of this filmmaker, Stan Brakhage, and even like Robert Breer. Like, were you inspired by that experimental animation?
So it's my sort of influences with my sort of animation style comes from mostly, I would say, a mixture of not necessarily either animator, to be honest. Probably the main animator that really kind of it's more so a lot of like old school vintage anime that do it. Particularly like Ashtina Joe or Tomorrow's Joe, as well as like in terms of animators, Norma Claren are probably like my like go-to
Oh yeah,
like
Norma Claren
inspirations. Like I was a big Norma Claren fan in college, even before like I like fully delved into like animating. Like I would say like those specifically like beyond like punk zines and graffiti culture, like those are probably like my like three like go-to ones. And last one would be not an anime per se, but a comic book artist named Jim Mafood, who created the Girl Scout series with Image, which is very like spray paint and like very like grungy kind of style, but that really inspired me a lot in my kind of artistry. So those are probably like four like baseline inspirations.
So what I'm trying to bring up, like I mentioned, so what I'm trying to bring up that I feel like, yeah, that Norma Claren. I thank you for mentioning that because like I feel like you watch his short films, and I feel like it kind of immediately registered that, like, oh wow, I could do that. Like, I don't need to draw Mickey Mouse or any sort of cartoon character. I could just create an abstract shape and animate that abstract shape. And that reminds me of what you. Sorry. What are you trying to say?
I was gonna say it's that, but also like his kind of way about it, his like sort of like almost like unorthodox style. Like he literally cut in like shapes in his film reels to create sound, which hence the very like, unique chipping and chirping you hear in his films. But that was sort of the thing I wanted to add on, like because that also like is a big thing, particularly with like because it's very like experimental and very like again, the adjective I'd use would be unorthodox because it's very much against the grain.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Norm McLaren is another rebellion right there. And
well, there are definitely building blocks as well. There's zines, there's drawing, there's art, there's sequences. There's lots of ways to build a following or an interest or capacity for the animated form.
Yeah. So here's our idea of what the animation equivalent to or the animation take on Born and Flay would look like. So it looks like it's something out of a zine, a DIY zine. It's a lot of cut out photos, moving, and abstract shape moving. And the audio is just more like a lo-fi recording of people in real life talking, and it's all structured like a documentary. It's almost like a Mary Beam short film. I screened that short film, like Paul Revere is here, where people, it was a bicentennial. It's a bicentennial documentary, sort of. It's a centennial year in the United States, and Mary Beams and her co-director went out and asked people, almost like a man on the street kind of way, about what they think about Paul Revere. Around people, tourists and bystanders around the Paul Revere statue, asked them about what Paul Revere meant for them. And we see a rotoscope of, outline of the people in those footages. We don't know how they look like, but we do get the outline. We do get how they look and sound. Yeah, I feel like that's like my summation, but there's more. Like you mentioned rotoscoping. Yeah, okay. No, I already talked about rotoscoping. Yes, and Ryan also brought up the Waltha Bashir, but I haven't seen that movie. But I mean, considering what's going on in Gaza right now, I feel like everyone is not in the mood for reappraising that movie. It's become more and more like it hasn't really particularly aged well. But you know what? I would probably give a chance, and I would just come up with my own opinion. I feel like I mean, sure, but the aesthetic might hold up, but it's just nowadays people start become more and more disagreeing with the message. And speaking of which, I'm gonna end with this quote from the Palestinian American painter by the name of Samia Halabi and her view of abstract art.
Abstract art is the culture of the working class, folks. It's not bourgeois culture. It was born with revolution every step of the way. So if someone co-opts it, it doesn't mean we shouldn't claim it for ourselves. Political, I tell you what it does by politics. It does by politics by not praising the ruling class. And what's important about working class culture and abstraction is that we look into general principles rather than particulars. General principles are super important to human civilization. And working class ideology says we preserve everything. We're not destroyers. It's the bourgeoisie who's the destroyer. Who's destroying Gaza? Not us. We preserve everything. We want to study everything.
People have said that the abstract expressionism is part of the bourgeois culture because how CIA used abstract expressionist painting to refute against the socialist realism from Soviet Union during the Cold War. Like, in the sense that it is co-opted by the authority, and people look at abstract painting and think that people just auction that art painting or buy that painting reason. It's a way of keeping up the money to make art like not inclusive or something like that. But Samia Halabi gave the unknown perspective that abstract art is rebel against bourgeois culture, like, or at least it rebel against the bourgeois taste. Much like how I said about the experimental animation, the animated media that doesn't exactly abide by 12 basic principles as a sort of very rebellious animation.
One thing that I love about doing this show is I always leave with like 2 hands full of animation recommendations.
Yeah, I mean, I sort of started this podcast just to explore like more nuance of the live action filmmaking and also animation storytelling. So to cap it off, so that's how we thought about the animation take on Born in Flames. So any final words, Ryan, Brandyn? I feel like I said everything what I wanted to say.
Just thank you all the time. Yeah, like I said, I always feel like these conversations are just gateways to 30 different references. It's like I went to the world's coolest video store every time I listen to an episode of this show. So if you're watching this, please keep subscribing, give this show a rating, keep supporting it. Give Jay the peer pressure to keep doing this because it's just a great repository.
And support us on Patreon.
Yeah.
I'll just say thanks for having us. This was fun. Please check out Born in Flames and, just watch animation. Just keep watching and also keep listening because people need more podcasts like this one.
We're going to talk about more unconventional DIY movie later in this season. So thank you all for having on the show and good night.
You just listened to the Reanimate This podcast. The opening theme music is Wanderlust, Celeste 3 mix by Celeste 3, and the ending theme music is Arizona Green Tea by Stuffy Doll. Please support their work on Bandcamp.
Arizona green tea by the can, trees made of salt water.